Welcome back. This past Friday, I visited the Metropolitan Museum of Art. If you're a New Jersey or New York resident, you can pay whatever you will to go into the museum simply by showing proof of residency. So, the question I'm trying to answer in this is, were the ancient Egyptians white? So, obviously, I visited the Ancient Egypt exhibit. And when I was there, I observed an interaction which I labeled as when white people begin to doubt the ideology of white supremacy. So there was a white woman, a white couple, a white woman and a man, and the white woman in disbelief, with disbelief on her face, said, "It is either the Egyptians thought dark skin was superior or they were in fact black. Otherwise, why did they paint themselves with dark skin if they were white?" Her white partner kept shaking his head in response to all of her concerns, but it was obvious she was unconvinced because she too began to shake her head. And the biggest smile crossed my face. There's hope. Some people, when presented with evidence that refute their long held beliefs, they do adjust their thinking. So were the ancient Egyptians white? The concept of blackness and whiteness as we know them did not exist at the time of the ancient Egyptians. However, what can be factually stated is that Egypt is in Africa and not in Europe. Hence, Egypt is an ancient African civilization that Europe cannot take credit for. Additionally, race is a social construct, not a biological one. All of us are from one human race, and a group of people who are now calling ourselves black have the same kind of diverse and genetically mixed features as we saw in ancient Egypt. Also, there's another myth about Negroid features. Like, if you see people from the continent of Africa, you will see indigenous Africans don't all look alike. They have such unique features and characteristics. So, this whitewashing of claiming that they're Negroid features and they're white features is just nonsense. So, to restate, Egypt is in Africa, Egypt is not in Europe, and the Egyptians were as diverse as people who call themselves black are. So, what is this need to make Egyptians white? I think this is at the heart of the delusion of white supremacy. If you've ever watched a movie about the crack epidemic, you've seen someone so addicted to drugs that the person will lie to you in order to gain access to money or the stuff in your house so they can buy drugs. White supremacy is exactly like that. It was made up to justify the theft of people and resources and to justify systemic oppression. So, in order to get proof of this lie to convince themselves and others, they needed to go back in history and label any culture that appears advanced as white. So, Egyptian culture was advanced, so it has to be labeled as white. Otherwise, white supremacy can't exist. Another example is how European cultures like to trace their intellectual heritage back to the Romans. Meanwhile, the historical Romans viewed Northern and Western Europeans as barbarians. So, yes, this need to go back and remake history so it fits the white supremacist narrative. There's also this additional impulse to lash out in violence when confronted with ideas that refute white supremacy. So, When explorers went to Egypt and saw statues with large noses that they would attribute to black people, they lashed out and chopped off the noses. So, how do I respond to this? And we see also that kind of violence in when black people have successful towns like Black Wall Street and Roswell. There's an attempt to destroy it because it refutes the ideology of white supremacy. So, how do I personally respond to white supremacy in this model? Well, when people try to bring this delusion to me, I can respond therapeutically and say, you need to go get the mental health treatment that you need to come back to the community as an equal. Or I could say facetiously, if I'm not being paid, bye Felicia, bye white supremacists. Thank you for listening.